Alright, welcome back guys. I figured for this first demo, what we're going to do is we're going to build a real simple house, and we'll build like a table to put inside of it, okay? Um, so we'll cover a couple different things along the way. I know that some people have asked, well, what's the difference between groups and components, and asked if I could clarify that a little bit more in this demo, which I'm going to do. So let's get into it here. So first thing, I can just erase the lady that's right here. And let's build an 8 foot by 6 foot space. So again, I'm going to use the line tool. I'm going to start here at the origin. I'm going to go out oops. Let's try that again. I'm going to go out 8 foot. So I'm going to type that. And I'll turn my camera off here. So you can see down here I'm entering these values. So I'm going to go this way, 6 foot. And then when I come back this way, just as a shortcut, see how it snaps into that green area right there? I'm going to hold down shift and I'm going to refer the distance. So I'm going to tell it stay on this angle but go to this distance right here, and you can see in the length measurement that it's going to 8 foot. So I can click there and then release and click again, and that's going to close that area off so that it generates a solid shape. Now, my OCD for reasons is going to actually um, flip this, and you can see right here when I talked about the default material that comes on faces when you create them. There's a light side and a dark side, which is shown up here. And so right now you can see that there's a light side right there, and if I actually just do half of this and reverse the faces here, you can see there's a light side and a dark side, which corresponds to those. If you're going to be doing rendering, a lot of the rendering stuff will only work with surfaces that are using the light side, and it will often ignore the dark side. That's not true for every program, but it is a good habit to get into. Anytime you're working with faces, you're going to reverse the face like that. Okay, so we have an 8 foot by 6 foot space here. Now, in this class, we're going to be using two distances, one for interior walls and one for exterior walls. Your interior walls are going to be 4 inches, and your exterior are going to are 4 or 4.5. Don't care which, just be consistent. Or 4 1/4, something in there. It's all fine. But just be consistent. If I start seeing one project you're doing 4 1/4 and the other you do 4.5, I'm going to start marking off points. Anyway, so figure out which of those values. I'm going to use 4, and then for the exterior, just use 6. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit F, and that's going to bring up this offset tool. And I can do it without this area selected, but it's usually easier just to click on it and then hit F to change over to this tool. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click once, and it's going to give me this offset right here. And just like the tool that we used in Illustrator the other day to do the offset with the lines, it's very similar. This is your negative distance and this is your positive distance. And well, except that I think you actually have to go like type negative. Well, anyway, it's a distance from wherever you're going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it, just exaggerate the distance out to here so that I know it's on that side. Don't, it can get kind of tricky if you like click there and then just kind of leave the mouse really close, because it might move back just on the inside and you don't see it. So anyway, this side I'm going to exaggerate the distance. I'm going to type 6. Because we're using an inches template, or at least I am in this case, I believe it works for most of these as well. It's going to, anytime you don't enter the units, it's going to assume inches. So I'm going to do 6, enter, and it's going to offset that distance 6 inches. And we can double check it again by using the tape measure. I can move it out there and you can see that it's 6 inches. So we now have what would be the floor and then the space for our walls. So if we were looking at this as if it was a floor plan, I could actually go top down and look at this and go, okay, here's our floor and here's our walls. And I can actually triple click on this and we'll move it out just so you can see the surface that's going on right there. Okay. So we've got that area. So now what do we need to do next? We need to actually create the walls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the push-pull tool, and that's P on the keyboard, or it's this tool right here, or it's going to be tools push-pull. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this surface right here, this exterior one that's making up our walls. I'm going to move it up, and again, I'm going to exaggerate the distance. I'm not going to hover super close here. And this can refer to other points too, so watch out where you actually use it. And in this case, I'm going to do 8 foot, enter. And so that's going to set this wall up at 8 foot tall, okay? So, very simple, couple lines, we already have an established space. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to triple click on this to select everything that's here. And what we're going to do, in the past I've made this a component, but just as a best practice, I've started making it groups instead. So I'm going to make a group out of this, and if we had a larger structure, you would do the same thing. It would just be more rooms and spaces. So I now have a group of this, and this is our walls and floor. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click in here. I'm going to select that floor that's right there, and I'm going to do Control X on the keyboard, but that's the same as going to Edit and Cut, and it's going to copy and delete. Then I'm going to hit Escape to get out of this, and once that little you see that there's this bounding box right here, that's indicating that I'm in some sort of group or other selection, a subset of something. So I can hit Escape to get out of there, or if you're in here, you can just kind of click on the outside areas that, like I can click here, I can click inside of it a whole bunch, but if I click outside, it will deselect. So I'll get out of there. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do Edit, Paste, and Place. And there's no keyboard shortcut, or at least I haven't found one yet. So I'm going to do Paste in Place. And what that's going to do is it's going to paste what I just cut back into the spot it was in. So I don't have to worry about putting it back in the right spot. And then while it's still selected, I'm going to right click and I'm going to do Make Group. Okay? So, and I'll just copy these off to the side so you can see what's going on. So there's a floor, and there's our, at least for now, super basic walls. Okay? It's two separate pieces. And again, because they're groups, I can do weird stuff with this, and it's not going to modify the one that's over there. There are situations where it may come in handy for you to turn this into a component. So for example, if this was my, let me explode this. So if you have a group or a component, you can explode it, and it'll revert back to sort of editable surfaces. So let's say I had this right here, and I can go in and I can do Make Component instead. And I'm going to call this my walls. Don't worry about any, yeah, it looks like nothing has changed here. So I'm going to do Create, make sure that's checked just so that you don't have to replace it. This Replace Selection with Component is going to effectively do a cut and paste in place when it creates this component. So we'll do Create, and now it should show up here in my Components menu. Purge unused, get rid of that. So now I've got this, which is, let's ignore this one for a while. We're going to run off over here in this direction and mess with this for a minute, and we'll get back to the other. So let's say I was working on something very complex, a huge project that I had going on. But for the sake of editing something, I want to make one small change. So I could copy this over here, and without getting stuck inside of furniture or other things inside of my model, I could come over here and do whatever it is I need to do while I'm working on it, and it would affect the model, but it would allow me to work around it without getting stuff in the way. So that's a huge advantage to doing a component. I've just kind of found it's easier to do what I'm about to show you next, which is back in this menu here. I'm going to minimize these. So there's this menu called Tags. And tags used to be what SketchUp called layers. They are the exact same thing. They work in the exact same way if you're still using Make 2017. And so what you can do is you can open up this tags menu, and right now everything is on this default layer. As your project starts to get bigger and more complicated, you're going to want to start adding things here. And so it's, again, this is one of those things that's a little bit different with Mac, and I barely use the Mac on this because they changed it way after I stopped using Macs. So for PC, at least, I can click on this little plus button here, and it's going to create another tag in here. Again, tags, exact same thing as layers, just a different name. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this my walls, and I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to call this the oops, not falls, floor. And then now that I have those two layers there, I can click on, say, the floors right now, and I can go to entity info, and there's a tag menu here. If you are working on a version of SketchUp where it is using the layer, or it's still being called layers, then it's just going to say layer here. That's the only difference. So the floors, I'm going to open up this drop down, click on floor, click on the walls, open the drop down, click on walls. So now I can come over here and I can actually toggle these on and toggle these on and off. Okay. This is something that I don't recommend you doing until your model starts to get complicated. And the reason why is you can run into some issues where if you change the layer you're actively working on, you can actually kind of screw up your model. So for example, right now this component is assigned to the walls layer, but if I go into this component, you can see that it's still untagged or basically on the default layer. And so what can happen is you can have, say, somehow while I was building, half this model I drew on the floor layer. So now when I go to hide the floor, half my model disappears. Okay? So anytime you're working on something, always make sure that you are working on that default layer. Make sure, yeah, we're good. Okay. Always make sure you are working on the default layer and then grouping things or componenting them and then moving them off of the default layer as the component or group. Don't move individual raw surfaces and shapes to other layers, and don't work on other layers. Always remain on this default layer when you're working, because otherwise you can introduce problems in your model. That gets a little bit complicated later on as well, there's a weird situation where you might want to. Don't worry about it for this class. This is way beyond the scope for what you guys are doing. So just always make sure you work on that default layer and then group or component, move it off. Okay? So, a couple tricky things I want to show you here. So first, I'm going to hide the floor. Not that it really matters, but just kind of get into practice of doing it. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a a door and a window in here. And so what I'm going to do is, again, I've already turned this into a component or a group. This one's the group, right? Yeah, this one's the group. Used. Okay, so I'm going to double click on here, and then I'm going to pull out the tape measure tool. I'm going to click, oops, of course I missed it. And I'm going to slide it. I want this door, see, I want it 6 inches from the corner here, but I'm going to measure it from the outside because it's an easier place to work. So I'm going to make sure it's going off in this red axis, hold down shift, and you can see that the red axis turns solid like that, and you know you're on the right direction. And then I can either put a spot right there and then do another one. I guess that's kind of silly because I could just do 1 foot. We can do math. Okay, so yeah, draw that out 1 foot, and you've got one side of your door. Come to the other side, and we'll say we'll make this a 2'6" door. So I'll do 2'6", and I'm not going to enter inches, but you can if you want. So that gives us the width of the door. And then we need the height, so I'm going to do one from the bottom, again making sure I'm clicking on that line right there. Try to avoid going to like a midpoint or intersection. I kind of covered this, but you end up with these weird dots. Let me see if I can get the midpoint. Midpoint works, so it's just that it's that intersection. You want to stay away from that. I'm going to just find this edge right here that I know is here, and I'm going to do 6'8", so 6'8". And that's the space for our door right there. So, and I kind of already shot through this earlier, if you were watching. To place a hole in this wall, to actually put a door, or to cut a space out for a door, I'm going to switch over to the rectangle tool right here, and I'm going to find this intersection right here. And every once in a while I'll get a student who says, hey, I did this up 6'8", and for whatever reason, see, that one's not even quite right. Like, for whatever reason, like, they moved it up here, the distance is right, but then all of a sudden we move the camera and this thing's like a fraction of a millimeter off. You always want to be referring points really accurately in here so that you make sure your model's 100% square, you're working with 90-degree angles, everything's accurate and tight, okay? So if you don't get an intersection at one of these spots when you go to draw it after that, you've missed one of the lines and you'll probably have to go back and redraw. Another issue that usually we'll see later on in the semester is someone goes, oh, I want to just move this wall, and so they'll do a selection like that, not see that they got some wall in the back, and then do that, and now you've got a crooked wall right here, but you didn't see it, and so then you go to do some other line, come through and trace, and all of a sudden things are filling in funny, and when you go to erase that line, your wall disappears. You've seen that a million times, and it's always because of little weird adjustments like that. So, step back here. Okay, there we go. So, always just make sure you're kind of working on one thing. Don't do weird selections in the background, all right? So, let's cut this. So we got a rectangle, intersection, good to go. So we'll place that there, and now again, like I was showing in the demo yesterday, you've got two separate surfaces here, so we can use the push-pull tool, P on the keyboard or this one right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to push it through. And see how it does this weird, like, graphic glitchy thing where, like, it looks all funny. That right there is saying, hey, these two surfaces are mathematically on top of each other, but I'm a computer, and because of how numbers work, I'm going to alternate which face I'm showing. And so that's why you get that weird graphically glitchy thing right there. But it's also going to give you the blue dot right here. And if I stop moving, it says on face, and then it's going to tell me offset's limited to 6 inches, or negative 6 inches in this case. And there's a couple other different ways I could do this. I could also come over here, refer to that point. I could refer to this face. I could refer to this corner. But it all accomplishes the same thing, which is saying I'm moving this in 6 inches, and it's going to cut that hole in that space right there. Okay? We'll erase those. Keep your model clean. And then in the center of the wall right here, we'll put a 4-foot wide window. And we're going to center this one in this wall. So I'm going to again come from the edge right here. I'm going to find the midpoint. I'm going to go, we said 4 foot wide, so I'm going to go 2 foot off in each direction. I'm going to go up and make sure that snaps to vertical. We're going to do 6 foot 8. And we'll be crazy and call this a 4 foot, yeah, we'll do 4 foot tall, making a nice big window. Okay, so that's the space for our window. Same process. Rectangle tool, intersection, draw the rectangle. Push-pull tool. Oh, had the wrong face there. And then push that in, and see we didn't get as much of it. There's the graphic glitch. So we're good to go there. All right. So real simple. We have a door, a window, or at least holes for them, and we have the walls here. So at that point, I'm going to click out of here. I'm done editing this, and I don't want to stay in. Oh, let's actually clean up our extra lines here. So I don't want to stay in here because I don't want to like mess with anything quite right now. I'm kind of fine with where this is at least. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over to here, and we're going to go to the tags menu again. I'm going to turn my floor on, and I'm going to leave the walls on for right now. And I'm going to just do this will make sense in a second, but I'm going to draw a rectangle from corner to corner here. And now I'm going to hide the walls. And so what I've got now is the floor that's right here, and I've got this little space. And this is just a reference for me to understand where the door space is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this floor, then I'm going to hover over it itself, and I'm going to bring this in I'm going to do a 1/2 inch, but this is a real simple way to add a baseboard to your project with like 0 effort. And so now you can see I've got this little lip right here, and I've got my reference spot. I'm just going to do a line right there, and then I'm going to rectangle this out, and I'm going to erase these two. Oh, oh, that's right. I drew this outside. Edit, paste in place. Okay, so now I've got that. I'm going to erase that spot right there. So now I have basically I guess basically the threshold of the door, and then I've got this lip running around the room. I'm going to reverse the face on this, keep the light sides facing up, and then once I'm happy with that, I'm going to push-pull this up. We'll just do like 2 inches. That's good enough for, this is a college student. college student living. We get 1 inch baseboards. All right. All right. Yeah. So those are our floors right there. We can turn the walls back on now, and you can see it's one of those little details that like people never think of, but it just kind of makes the room look so much better. And you can do the exact same thing when you put in a ceiling too. If you want to do crown molding, you just come in here, offset this. I don't know. Let's say 1 inch, um, and then in this case, because we're doing crown molding, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to I'll move it up like that, and then um, now I kind of want to make that a little bit thicker. Let's do like 2 inches in. And then I'll offset this in, and we'll just do 1 inch for that. And then I'm going to take this face right here, and this is just a different way to do kind of stuff. And I'll move this up 1 inch. So you get a little bit of that kind of crown molding effect, and then we'll push pull this up another inch. And then this is kind of a cheating way to make it. Um, it works though. So we'll make that a group, and then what we'll do inside of here is we'll flip along the blue direction. And so this is basically kind of like a mirror tool. So I'll flip along blue direction, and happy with that. And then I will do a move tool on this corner, and then lock it into that vertical axis and move it right there. And again, super quick, easy way to get like kind of decent crown molding into a space, right? We'll make another tag for that, ceiling, and off to the ceiling you go. But we don't need that for right now. Ooh. Okay, so ceiling, floor. All right, so super simple space, got it all out. Let's throw some materials on here. Materials is usually one of those things I don't touch until super last minute. Like, I have entire projects where it was completely white until like the week before the project was due. And that's a personal preference, but it also lets me kind of go, oh, what colors work best for this, and kind of throw them all in all at once, so that everything's consistent. And especially if you get into 3D modeling, you want to use as few materials as possible. It becomes a setup issue when you have 16 types of things that are labeled chrome from different things you brought in from the workshop. Or you've got 8 different carpets, you've got 4 different slightly different green colors that you used for walls and stuff. So I like to just kind of leave my entire model white. I'm not going to do this for this demo, just because we want to get into kind of actually applying a whole bunch of things in here. So actually we're at 23 minutes, so let's end this. We'll get into colors, and yeah, so we've got basically a model in white. We'll get into colors next, and then I will go into let's model a door and a window for this. So we'll call this one for now, and we'll jump into another one.